Hello, this is Dustin, and in this video we will be covering how to migrate your data from the old 9.14 version of the Passive Portfolio Tracker spreadsheet to the new 2.27 version of the spreadsheet. Migrating our data from the old version to the new version is something that Nora and I pay a lot of attention to. As we're doing the development on the spreadsheet, Nora will send me new versions multiple times a week, and I will be migrating my personal data multiple times a week. So it is something that we actually pay a lot of attention to and try to make it as easy as possible. Here on the top we have the new version, and here on the bottom we have a previous version with a bunch of sample data. We will be migrating this sample data to the new 2.27 version up here. That is just how you get it when you download it for the first time. You got one sample property in here that we need to overwrite. Here on the new properties tab is where it is going to be the most complicated for migrating our data, but it is not that complicated. We just need to pay a little bit of attention to what our columns are on the new version and what our columns are on the old version. To begin with, we will notice that our first few columns here, property name, partnership name, address, and city, state. On the new version, property, partnership, address, and then city, state are separated out. So what we will need to do is highlight our data on the old spreadsheet just to the address, copy that. Then we will come up to the new spreadsheet, click into the property name. The old spreadsheet we started with property name. The new spreadsheet we will start with property name. We will right click, we'll go down to paste special. Before we were using paste values, now we're using paste formulas because we do have some formulas in here. A lot of places you can use either one, but for now let's stick with using paste formulas. And as you can see, now we have property name, partnership name, and address for our first 20 properties. For city and state, we'll need to manually type those in as separate city and separate state based on what we have in the old one. This is the most complicated part of migrating our data from the old 9.14 version. I already have this data typed up, so I will copy and paste it over. Our next column is a zip code column, which we do not have on the old version of the spreadsheet. If you know the zip code, you can enter it for your property. If you don't know the zip code, you can leave this blank. Since I don't have this data already typed up, I'm going to leave the zip code column blank for now. But if you have the data, you can enter it. Moving on, our next columns are the lead's name, lead's email address, lead's phone number, and then we change things up again. So we're just going to copy these three columns. Again, I'm going to come here to the first cell that we copied, and I'm going to right-click, paste special, paste formulas. Now we have copied over our lead name, lead email, and lead phone numbers. The next column is lead's deal number. This is a brand new column for the new version of the spreadsheet, the 2.27 version, so we don't have this data in the old version. You can go through and track all of this for your leads. If you don't have this data, you don't have to fill it in. It is not bright yellow, so you can leave it blank. I have this data already, so I will copy it over. Next, we have the lead override column. This column has been moved in order, so we do have this data on the old spreadsheet, so we just copy and paste this data over. Next, we move to information about the purchase of the property. These next few columns, purchase, units, year built, hybrid value, purchase price, loan amount, capital raise, so we can copy all of this data together. Come back up here to our new version, go to the first cell that we've copied, purchase date, right click, paste formulas. Now we have a couple options. We can scroll across our spreadsheet, or we can take advantage of our expand and collapse bars at the top and collapse down our spreadsheet. I'm going to choose to collapse down all the property and lead information by clicking the minus button here. As you can see, that now gives us a plus. We see more information on our screen. It is important to remember these expansion and collapse buttons here at the top as we're migrating our data across so that we don't miss some columns. So make sure everything is expanded out as you start working on this. Next, we have our loan to value column. There is a formula in this column that will automatically calculate your loan to value, but if for some reason you wanted to use a different number in this column, you can do that. The new version will track that and change the cell to green if you use a different number. We will quickly glance through here and notice on our old version we used 80% for our fourth property, and on the new version we have 76% for this property. So I will click in this cell, manually type in 80 to match what we had in our previous one. This is something that if you are manually changing these from the old version, you'll have to pay attention to this one column, or any of the green columns you'll have to pay attention. Going forward, we're making this easier by highlighting in green the cells that have been manually edited from the formula. So you will know which ones you need to pay attention to when migrating your data to a new version of the spreadsheet. The next column is number of investors. This column has also been reordered, so we'll do this one column. Our next column is KP. We have changed the KP column from a yes or no column to putting the percent that your KP override is. When you put your override percentage in here, it will adjust your schedule of percent owned and economic interest to include your override. Since the previous version only had yes or no in here, I will use other sample data to migrate across. Now, instead of having yes or no, we have the percentage of the override for these deals. The next two columns are entity name and amount invested. These two columns are in the same order as the old version, so we can copy both of them at the same time. And we will paste them in. Notice here property number 20 is highlighted in orange. This is because we do not have a purchase date on this property. If any property is missing a purchase date or an amount invested, it will stay highlighted in orange. This is useful for when you're subscribing to a deal but it hasn't closed yet. You know that that deal hasn't closed. Or if you're trying to get into a deal but don't know that you've been accepted yet, until you have this purchase date and your amount invested in here, the property will highlight itself in orange to let you know that it is not a done deal yet. The next three columns are brand new for the 227 version of the tracker. And this is our cash call section. If you have a property that does a cash call, we will track the cash call date, the cash call amount that you invested into the deal, and the total amount raised by this cash call. We have sample data here for the sample property number 1. If you don't have any cash calls and you just want to get rid of this, you can highlight these three and clear contents, or simply hit the delete key. Now the sample cash call data has been removed. If you do have a property that has done a cash call, you can enter your cash call data in there. I will enter sample cash call data for property number 3. This cash call data will affect your schedule owned and economic interest and update the new schedule owned cash call and economic interest cash call. We track both and the date of the cash call. So before the cash call happened, the tracker bases your return on schedule owned and economic interest here. After the cash call, it's going to track future returns based on your cash call schedule owned and economic interest. So we do pay attention to when that cash call happened and adjust your return based on when the cash call happened. The last new section of the Properties tab is a notes column. If you want to add any notes to these properties, you can type those in. Since we did not have notes previously, there should be no data to migrate across. Here on the 9.14 version, I'm going to collapse down our property information so that we can see all the way to the end that there is no other data to migrate across. So that is covered moving all of our initial Properties tab information from the old version to the new version. Migrating data for the Properties tab is the most complicated thing we have to do. Next, we'll be moving on to the Quarterlies tab. The most important thing to pay attention as we migrate our data across is that we have scrolled all the way to the beginning of all tabs. We want to make sure that the tab we're starting with is the same, Q4 2014, Q4 2014. So we will come down here and we will select that 0. Then we will scroll to the last bit of data that we have entered on our old version. Hold the Shift button, click and select all of that data. We're selecting even the blank cells that are grayed out, everything we're using here. We can right click and copy, or we can hit Command or Control C to copy. Now we want to go back to our new version. Make sure we are selecting the very first cell, right click, paste special, paste formulas, and now all of our new data will populate. That is about how complicated it is to migrate our data over. Now we can scroll and look to make sure our numbers all match up. We are Q3 of 2021, Q3 of 2021, 75,351, 75,351. Our distributions for that quarter were 20,687, 20,687. All of our numbers line up. Now you will notice that we do not have our ending information here because we have not entered data onto the sold tab or the sales tab yet. One feature on the new version is we have tracked over our cash call. So it shows us the quarter we had a cash call here in orange. We do not see our cash call date column because we need to click on our plus up here and expand all of our data here in the beginning. Now we can see our cash call column. Next, we will look at a new column which has been added, column M, which is the expected first distribution. If the lead tells you what quarter they project to do their first distribution, this is where you can enter that data. I have this data typed up, so I will move it over. Notice as I click in this cell to copy my data over, there is a pull-down menu. This pull-down allows you to go through and select what quarter the lead is projecting. I will not be using that because I have sample data already typed up that I'm going to paste in. Notice that this data now adds blue boxes to our distributions. These blue boxes are when the first distribution is projected. So if we come down here to property number 5, we are projecting quarter 5 as our first quarter of distribution. The green box shows us our first full quarter of ownership. We had 4 quarters with no distribution, and then our 5th quarter, the lead projected its first distribution, and we got our first distribution on that quarter. Our next user editable column is column N, which allows you to track undeposited, or if you click the checkbox here, to track deposited amounts. We will say that this property, the amount has not been deposited. This one, and this one. Notice it highlights these distributions in orange, and up here on column D, we track that there are 3 undeposited amounts, and the dollar amount of those 3 is $4,600. This is useful if a lead tells you they are going to be sending you a check for $1,300, $1,800, and $1,500, but you have not received or deposited those checks yet. You know that that money is coming, but it is not yet deposited. Now, if you prefer to work in a more positive manner, you can click this box up here, the mark deposited. It will change these X's and your boxes to green. What this means is only the green ones have been deposited and everything else has not been deposited yet. So however you choose to work, you can work. If you work with the has deposited, you need to make sure that you put X's in all of your columns as they are deposited to make sure your balance shows up correctly. Now, here on our column DE, it shows that we have 11 undeposited in the dollar amount of $16,086. Nora prefers to work in this positive manner, and at the end of her quarter, she'll have a full row of green X's. I, on the other hand, prefer to track only what has not been deposited, and I know my quarter is complete when there are no X's in this column. You can work the way that makes you the most comfortable. So again, the most important thing as we're migrating our data from one spreadsheet to the next is to make sure that you are all the way at the very beginning on both versions so that we're migrating our data from the same to the same. The next tab to migrate data from is on the Financials tab. Here on the Financials tab, we have changed the current loan amount from a formula only to an editable formula. To migrate our data, we will start here on property 1, making sure that we are all the way scrolled over to property 1 and to the current debt service. We'll select that. We will hold our shift key, come all the way down here to our new cap rate for property number 20. That gets all of our data. It is okay that we've highlighted these blank lines. They won't hurt. We will right click and copy. We can also do Command C, Control C for Mac or Windows. And we will go back up and make sure the cell we have selected is Property 1, Current Debt Service. We will then right click, Paste Special, Formulas, and all of our financials data will migrate over very easily. Next, if we want to change the current loan balance information from what the formula comes up with, so something more accurate from our balance sheet, we can type into these cells and change that. Let's say we've paid down some of this 2.5 million to 2.3. We can type that in there, and notice now that I have changed the formula, that cell is highlighted in green. So as I move data forward to new versions of the spreadsheet in the future, I can easily remember that that has been manually edited from the formula. Next, we will move on to our MFQA tab. Here on our MFQA tab, again, we want to make sure we have expanded out all of our expansion columns on both versions of the spreadsheet. Make sure we're scrolled to the very first property. We will click on that in the yellow cell. We will come across to net ROI for year 2, and we will select all of that data. Because cap rate is a formula, I'm going to skip over that because this formula in the old version could be slightly different from the formula in the new version. So here we will right click and copy. Again, we will make sure that we're coming to the first cell for the first property on the new spreadsheet. We will right click, paste special, and paste formulas. Now I can go through and verify that my cap rates here match my cap rates down here. That can be a little bit of a manual process. Going forward, if I edit any of these cap rates, they will highlight in green like we have previously shown, so it'll be easier to notice ones that have been manually edited versus the ones that are using the formula. Next, we will come down and select our year 3 data, everything except cap rate. Make sure we go all the way up to our property 1, first cell of year 3, and paste the data. Now we have migrated all of our MFQA data. It is that simple. Next, we will be moving to the Loans tab. Here on the Loans tab, we have added a new column to track your date of your cash calls. And one thing we want to do this time, we want to collapse our data on both spreadsheets so that we can see our information a little bit easier. Next, we want to make sure we have scrolled all the way over to get to the years of IO on both spreadsheets. That is going to be our first column that is copied. There are no changes in our data. We have years of IO, balloon term, refi, initial refi amount distribution, expected date, remaining distribution, new loan amount, supplemental yes or no, interest rate, amortization. All of these yellow columns from the old version are the exact same as the new version. So we can come to our first property, years of IO, and select everything for our sample properties, right click, copy. Again, notice that it does not matter that I'm copying a bunch of cells that are empty on the new spreadsheet. Make sure that I'm going to property number 1, the same place I started on the old version. Right click, paste special, paste formulas, and now all of our data is migrated over. We can look at our total cash distributions, make sure that those line up. We could also look down here at our white cells and make sure those line up, just to have a comfortable feeling that everything looks the same between the two versions. The next tab we want to move to is our Sales tab. So here on the Sales tab, we want to make sure we are scrolled up to our first property and to the sale date column. We will highlight all of our sale data. It is important to make sure you're only selecting the yellow cells as we're migrating data from one spreadsheet to the other. If you select any of the gray or white cells or a blue cell, you will get an error. So we want to make sure we only select the yellow cells, copy. Now as we move up to our new spreadsheet, notice that there is a new column for sold price. We don't want to select that one. We want to go to our first property, sale date. The sale date is what we started with on the bottom. Highlight sale date, right click, paste special, paste formulas, and now we have entered our sale date, proceeds number 1 and proceeds number 2 data. This new column, sold price, is just a good place for you to track how much the property actually sold for. We have also added a non-editable column of purchase price. We pulled this data forward from the Properties tab so you can see how much you purchased for, and you can manually enter how much you sold the property for if you know. This is just nice to have information. You can go through and find all of your sold prices for the properties you've sold and manually enter them. These are all the changes for the Sale tab. Next, we will be moving to the Reports tab. On the Reports tab, every year is collapsible and expandable, so make sure you pay attention to that. If you notice our sample data, we only have year 2022 sample data. But what I can do here, even though everything is collapsed, I can go to my first column and come all the way down to 2023, shift click to select all of that, right click and copy. So now even though everything is collapsed, I can still select and copy. Now I can move up to my new one. We'll make sure we select the January 2014 cell, right click, paste special formulas, and it will move all of our data over. So now if we come up here and expand our year 2022, you can see we have data in January, February, and March of 2022. If we come down here to our old version, the 914 version, and we expand 2022, again, notice we have January, February, and March data. The March data doesn't look like it matches up. We have quarterly reports were delivered, K1s were delivered, and we also have Zoom meetings on these two. So we don't see the Zoom meetings. The problem here, we need to make this CX column a little bit wider, and our Zoom meeting shows up. If cells don't look identical, sometimes you need to expand them out. You can click here and drag, or you can double click and it will automatically resize for you. But notice that we were able to copy that even though the columns were collapsed. We could also come through, select the specific data with everything expanded, copy and paste that. Next, we will be moving to the Links tab. Here on the Links tab, I don't have much sample data, but what I will do is make sure I'm on the apartment website up here. I will come through and select. We can come all the way down here to the end, shift click to select all of those cells. Doesn't matter that we are selecting empty cells. There is nothing that's expandable or collapsible on this, so we don't have to worry about that. Copy. Next, I will come up and make sure I'm selecting the apartment website for property number 4, because that is where we started our copy from, and I will paste. So notice we have the apartment's website. Portal is Podium. You can put the URL of Podium. You can just write the name of Podium, however you want to do that. I have a username in here. Notice that the username is being cut off because the cell's not wide enough, so you can widen that cell. And I have a hint for the password, how many dogs. Don't put your actual password in here. Put something that lets you know what password you used. Or you can leave this blank and keep your passwords tracked somewhere else. Make sure you do not put a password, the actual password here. The next tab we will go to is the schedule of real estate owned. On this tab, if you are a lead or a KP and you track your lender and whether your loans are recourse or not, you can copy that data and migrate it up to the new version. There are no changes on this tab. Next, we will start working on our new Graphs I and Graphs II tab. We will start with the Graphs I tab. Here at the top of the Graphs I tab, we have a summary of our investments, how many deals we've done, how many we've sold, lots of useful information here. And on this side, we have a table 2, which is a summary of our last 10 years worth of investment. Below that, we have graphs and pie charts. The graphs are listed here. You can click on these links to go straight to the graphs. And the pie charts are listed here, and you can click on these links to go straight to the pie charts. To update the data in the pie charts, we first need to refresh all the data. Currently, if we go down to a pie chart, you will notice that it does not have all of our sample data. And as we scroll down, none of the pie charts have all of our sample data. Here on the right side of the pie charts, we can easily jump to different charts, or we can jump back to the table. So now we're back at the top. What we need to do is scroll to the right to our pivot tables here. The first thing we need to do is follow the instructions here at the top. Go to Data, Refresh All. Click on Data up here, and then we'll come and click on the Refresh All. Once that is done, we need to go to each one of these tables and click on the Filter button. Come down here, and you can see that our data has now been updated, but it's not selected to be in the graph. So we can click Select All. Then we need to unselect the blank space. Once that is done, we can close this box. Do that for all of these tables. Notice here on the leads table, we have 181 blank leads here at the bottom. That is the reason we need to uncheck the blanks box. And those will go away. Now it just shows all of our leads and how many deals each lead has. Now we have updated all of our pivot tables. We can scroll back to the left and we can go back down to our pie charts. And as you see, our investments per city has now updated. As we scroll down, the dollar amounts invested per city is updated, and so on. Click our link to go back to the top, and that is how we get updated and most accurate information in our Graphs tab. As you add more properties to your tracker, you will need to come back and refresh all of this data and update your pivot tables. Next, we will move to the Graphs II tab. On our Graphs II tab, we'll notice that we only have our sample property and nothing else. On this one, as you add more properties, this table will grow across. So we've hidden all the pivot tables to the left. And you will need to come up here and expand this button. And we'll scroll back to the top and all the way over. So now we're at cell A1, so we can see all of our pivot tables. Again, we will go to the Data tab and refresh all. And now we will follow our instructions up here in red. Go to our filter icon. We need to change the select field from A to properties. Now we can see all of our properties. We will select all. And you see we've got all of our blank lines down here. So we uncheck our blank to get rid of them. And we can close this dialog box. Moving on to the next one. Select properties, select all. Now we will scroll over so we can see our last two pivot tables. And again, we will click on the filter, properties. Once you have all of this updated, you can collapse this section, scroll back over so that our charts are filling the frame. And now you can see that our charts have all of our new data. And again, down the side, we have links to the other charts. And that concludes our training video on how to migrate your data from the old 9.14 version to the new 2.27 version of the Passive Portfolio Tracker. Hopefully this has been a useful video. And if you have any questions, please contact Nora or myself at tracker@sandust.com. We look forward to hearing from you.